Hello YouTube and welcome back to the channel. This is JNC Jib here with another post-ROTA video. And today we are going to be doing a not really combo tutorial, but a deck profile for a sample list for one of the scariest decks going into the ROTA format. And that is Tenpai Dragon with the new hand traps. So you might be asking, hey Jib, what has changed about Tenpai? The engine has been hit. The deck hasn't really gotten any support of consequence. They did get a new Sengen spell, but it's not very good. Why is this deck so scary? Well, the deck has access to 6 new hand traps that have complete synergy with the strategy and no real downsides to them being played in this deck. But we will talk about those hand traps momentarily. So let's go through the profile. We played 3 copies of Pydra, 3 copies of Chandra, 2 copies of Genroku, 1 copy of Fadra, and 1 copy of Dorodrago. This is the ratio that I like right now. I know before the ban list, people weren't really playing Dorodrago. The card wasn't super necessary. But I think with the hit to Prosperity and Sengen Kaiman, it is kind of nice to have another starter in the deck in order to be able to get to your Chandra more consistently and go Genroku. Dorodrago is a fire dragon, so if you do have the field spell, it is unaffected, and it is searchable off of Sengen Kaiman, which is cool. It's not really relevant that you'll be searching off of Sengen Kaiman, but it is something that can be searched off of Sengen Kaiman, so that is something to keep in mind for very niche situations. The next cards are 1 copy of the field spell. Sad to see this card, or I'm happy to see this card go to 1 because this deck is so frustrating to play against. But I know the Tenpai players really hate to see this card at 1 with the 1 terraforming. So yeah, Sengen Kaiman basically was the best card in the deck. It's a revolutionary field spell, honestly, in what it offers for this Tenpai strategy or a Yu-Gi-Oh deck in general. It's a very criminally overpowered field spell, and on the most recent Forbidden Limited list, we see it go to 1 to make this deck a little bit more vulnerable to some of the things that your opponent is trying to do, lower how unfair this deck is. But this deck is pretty unfair pre-ROTA and is just getting even more unfair post-ROTA. So 1 copy of Sengen Kaiman with 1 terraforming, 3 copies of Sengen Kaiman, Sengen Summoning. I keep on saying Sengen Kaiman, but Sengen Summoning. And 3 copies of Sengen Kaiman, your emergency teleport. Then 1 copy of Prosperity to round out your engine. So you have 16 engine cards, 15 starters, 1 brick. And I think that's pretty consistent for a 1-card starter deck. And when you draw them in combinations, they're able to play, which is really neat. And it's just all around a pretty consistent strategy. Now, the rest of the deck is just all non-engine. And that is pretty much what's made Tenpai such a insane threat since its release back in Legacy of Destruction. But more recently, post Infinite Forbidden with the introduction of Genroku. But this deck has room for an obscene amount of non-engine. And this particular list that we're taking a look at has 26 non-engine cards. Yes, I'll repeat that. 26 non-engine cards. So you're averaging 3 non-engine cards per hand, which is probably the most that any deck is in the current format averaging. And the type of non-engine cards that you're able to play in this deck are absolutely ridiculous. So we play 1 copy of Magnum, which I separated from the rest of the engine because it's kind of it's a half starter. It's a non-engine that you can drop on your opponent's turn in order to give you access during your turn. But it's not a card that you necessarily want to. If you're ever going first, is not a card that's helping you play. Or if you have to drop it on your own turn, is not a card that's helping you play. But it is a broken hand trap, and it synergizes completely with your deck. So 1 copy of Magnum, 3 copies of Dimensional Shifter, which is the best hand trap in the game. And not a lot of decks can use it. And this is by far one of the best decks to be able to use Dimensional Shifter. Basically forcing your opponent to end on a subpar board or no board at all. And you're playing an OTK strategy. That OTKs through non-engine and Prosperity. So yeah, Shifter is definitely a card of all time, and it's very much showcasing the strategy. Now for the Molcharmies, we have the 3 Parelia, which is a card that's been seen play in Tenpai since its release. But now we have 3 copies of Fuvaros. So 6 copies of Mulcharmy in the main. For those who do not know, Furos is probably one of the most anticipated cards to come out in the last year, and it's sporting a pre-release price of $160 a copy for a reason. And the card reads, if you control no cards, quick effect, you can discard this card. Apply these effects this turn. Each time your opponent will special summon monsters from the deck or extra deck, immediately draw 1 card. During your end phase, if the number of cards in your hand are more than the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6, you must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck so that the number of cards in your hand equals the number of cards your opponent controls plus 6. This effect is not super relevant, but what's relevant is that this card is basically a slightly weaker form of Maxi, allowing you to draw a multitude of cards from your deck and slowing your opponent down or completely halting their plays in order to try to prevent you from maximizing off of this card's value. And in a deck like Tenpai, where all you're drawing is non-engine cards, these 6 cards are super deadly, and Tenpai has access to 9 hand traps that have the potential to immediately stop your opponent's play, or at the very least completely cripple and hinder their plays. Now for some of the board breakers, because sometimes Tenpai can't rely completely on hand traps and likes to mix hand traps with board breakers because you just have so much room. 3 copies of Raigeki. Destroy all your opponent's monsters. It's just a very good card, and it's seen success in Tenpai. Just helps you soften the board or clear the board in order to push through with your Tenpai monsters. 2 copies of Lightning Storm. Again, it can destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters, but more importantly, it's able to clean up your opponent's back rows. Now that Sengen Kaiman's at 1, you don't completely not care about cards like Impermanence. You would like to be able to clear up your opponent's back row that can stop your Tenpai monsters during the main phase, because now you're going to see the field spell less often. You're more going to be searching it off of Pydra than starting with it. So you still want a card like Lightning Storm to clean up your opponent's back row. A card like Dropless just puts all of the board breakers together or glues them together. It's just a card to combo with your other board breakers in order to push them through, in order to really clear your opponent's board. Negate your opponent's monster effects so that your Tenpai monsters can go through and just OTK through the bodies. Very good card. You'll have a lot of extra cards in hand that you don't really need. You're able to OTK with 1 card, and you'll have a lot of spells that you're activating and traps you're activating that you can just chain Dropless to in order to get value, and you'll have extra monster hand traps in your hand usually to send, so it doesn't really matter. Then the next card is another hand trap that we're getting in Infinite Forbidden, or not Infinite Forbidden, excuse me, Rage of the Abyss, and it's Dominus Impulse. And this is the other of the hand traps that I was talking about that makes Tenpai infinitely better. And let's read the card. It says, if your opponent controls a card, you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated that would include the effect to special summon a monsters, negate the effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. You can if you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of Earth, Light, and Wind monsters for the rest of the duel. You can only activate 1 Dominus Impulse once per turn. So if you haven't noticed, we're not playing any Earth, Light, or Wind monsters that we care about negating. The only Wind monster in our main deck is Fulveros, but Fulveros is a card that you're going to be activating before you would usually even get a chance to use Impulse. So there's no confliction there, and the only light monster that we really care about that's in our extra deck is Seals, and Seals is really only an option for when A, we get stopped, or A, we go first, and B, we get stopped, and so it's usually not relevant in the situations that we would want to be in. So has no downside in this deck. It's just another negation card that cards like Crossout usually aren't going to be there for, because not every deck can play it. No called by, doesn't play into tactics. Cards like Phantom of Yubel can't stop it. Amazing addition for Tenpai. And 3 copies of Impermanence. Just another hand trap that's versatile that you can use on your opponent's turn. You can draw it for turn and use it on your turn. It combos well with Impulse because, again, like Impulse does, if you have another trap in the graveyard, you can destroy the card that you negate. So if you imperm them, then impulse them later, then the impulse becomes a gamma. Yeah, just very, very good. Excellent deck overall, and very toxic to play against. As for the extra deck, we can run through it relatively quickly. There's not much to be said here. 1 copy of Koi Belt, 1 Black Rose, 2 Sengen Dragon, Bident Dragon, 1 copy of Super Transcendent. You can play the second Super Transcendent if you expect Kashtira cards to see play. If you don't really expect Kashtira cards, then the second one is not needed. 1 Trident Dragon, 1 Ruddy Rose Dragon. This is here for those pesky Fukos that the Snake Eye player might play, and if they committed more cards to the graveyard, you can banish the graveyard. Against certain matchups, you just make Ruddy Rose when you can't OTK to simplify the game state. For the links, we play 1 copy of Striker Dragon with the Little Knight in order to give you options for when you get barriered. 1 copy of Seals for when you go first. The Charmers in order to access the Zelantis package to help you OTK when you get barriered. So that's it for the deck profile, and if you like decks like these, definitely make sure to check out more videos on the channel. JNC Jib, signing out.